Hey, Tennessee's in a position where we haven't seen a lot of coaching changes over the years, but we've seen a few. And often Tennessee is promoted from within, with Josh Heupel as the head coach. Mike Eckler going to Nebraska. Do you think this is another promote from within opportunity, or where do you think this leaves Tennessee with the one opening right now on the staff?
Yeah, I mean, the natural move here would be to promote Coach Chop. Coach Chop had been on the road recruiting all through the month of January. Coach Eckler was not on the road recruiting. And so the natural move here is to make Coach Chop the Leo's coach. I would say they would handle special teams a little bit differently. You probably go out and you can either, like a guy like Evan Crabtree, who's been on staff helping with special teams the last several years, maybe you give him a bump in pay and give him more of a title. Or, maybe you go out and hire a special teams coach, because there's no kind of rules on the number of assistant coaches you can have, and they can all be on the field now. Like, it's not in the old days, they all kind of, stand off to the side. And then when the media left, the coaches would go out there, and then everybody realized, well, there's no way to really police this. This is a stupid rule. So they changed it. And so I think you would see them give the special teams role to somebody else. And it wouldn't be like whoever replaces Mike Eckler, does outside linebackers and special teams. And Coach Chop makes the most sense to be promoted. Of all the promotions that Coach Heupel has done here, during his 4-year run, this one probably makes the most sense out of maybe any of them.
Austin Price, VolQuest.com, is with us. What is the biggest focus right now with 2026 recruiting? Today is actually a signing day for the second signing period for the 2025 class, but Tennessee has been on to 2026. What's the biggest focus or attention right now for 2026 recruiting?
Well, it's just about continuing to build your roster. I don't know if there's a singular focus, but, Tennessee obviously wants to, add some key pieces up front. I think to add to the defensive line is very, very important, to the staff. And so, when you look at, defensive linemen like Keyshawn Stansel from the state of North Carolina, J.J. Finch, you got edge players that Tennessee's in good shape with, like a Zach Groves, who's out of the mid-state, Rodney Dunham. I think those are important. Braden Rouse, linebacker out of the state of Georgia, also very important. But, so are, a high-end running back like Savion Hyder or Amari Latimer. Both those guys are very, very important. So Tennessee at this point in the process, just trying to, continuing to build off what is already an impressive start to their 2026 class with some key guys already committed.
Going back to the coaching staff, AP, a couple guys on the staff had expiring contracts, strength coach, along with DB coach and Willie Martinez. And Willie had a 1-year contract the previous year. Why did Willie only get a 1-year contract last year to now have his contract now to be expired? Kind of what's the situation there, Willie Martinez?
Well, I think you're looking at, much like Mike Eckler, had Eckler, wanted to come back, I think Eckler, would have been back on another 1-year deal, much like Martinez. And so that's kind of where you're at in the process. Both those coaches are, going to have an opportunity to come back, or at least, Willie Martinez is, now that Eckler's moved on to Nebraska. And then, he'll be back on likely another 1-year deal.
Austin Price, VolQuest.com. Austin, Tennessee is in training mode, off-season workouts, getting ready for the spring. How important will this spring be, do you think, for Lance Hurd, as Tennessee's in a big transitionary period with the offensive line? Hurd's at least right now, the only projected starter coming back for 2025.
It's a big spring. It's a big spring for the offensive line in general, whether it's those young guys trying to prove themselves, whether it is Lance Hurd in year 2, Wendell Moy or Sam Pendleton transferring in, David Sanders as an early enrollee true freshman. The offensive line, I think, is more talented. It is a deeper unit than at any point during Glenn Ellerbe and Josh Heupel's tenure. But I do think there are some questions there. Now, if the questions get answered, I think all of a sudden you look around and go, man, they are really got a chance to be really good up front. But, what does David Sanders look like? How quickly can these transfers mesh and become a thing? What happens with Andre Keurig? I mean, he should probably hear sometime this week whether he can win this appeal or not. The first couple of rulings haven't went his way. Does that change this week? We'll see. And then what about these younger guys? What does, Jesse Perry, William Satterwhite, Max Anderson, what does, some of these players look like, Bennett Warren, Gage Ginther in their second year or second spring in the program.
Austin Price, Volquest.com. So if Karch were to come back, and I guess it's maybe not trending that direction, if he were, would Pendleton stand more likely to be the center? Do you think? What would that look like if Karch were to somehow win his appeal?
That's my take on it, Josh. Just because Sam is, I think, open to playing center. He was able to, he played some center at Notre Dame. Smart kid. That one probably makes the most sense to me. And then you just put Wendell Moy and play Spraggins, and Andre plays where he played a year ago, and there's your interior offensive line. But at this point, who knows what happens with that whole situation. I wish I could predict it, but that stuff you can't predict it. If you think one minute you think there's no chance and they do, and then you think there's a great chance and they don't. So, we'll see what happens there. Tennessee's got depth. I think they've got talent. They just got to answer some questions along the offensive line.
Florida flipped on his Kenan Banny, the corner from Tennessee. Kind of what happened there? Is Tennessee looking to kind of replace that spot that's now open?
There's no really replacing. I mean, with today's being signing day, there's so many players out there that you can go get. Now, could Tennessee add somebody in the spring portal window with it? Maybe. I think this spring will be big for a lot of positions. Does Tennessee look at a linebacker? Do they look at a corner? Do they look at a safety? Do they look at another running back? I don't think they're going to look at another running back, but I mean, those other spots, I think they'll definitely add a receiver. I would be shocked if they go through spring and don't add a receiver after spring. But those other spots, I think it really just depends on how these young players come along. Do they show you enough? Does Trey Poteet and Ty Redmond and some of these younger players, Caleb Beasley, do they show enough to warrant not going for some defensive back help in the spring? Just because your premier corner, or at least one of your two premier corners, is out right now with injury, with Dermot McCoy. So I think, a lot of it will depend on how they look this spring as to whether they look to replace him. But, Onus, it's just one thing where he just, started taking visits and he just kind of, spiraled the other direction.
Austin, you mentioned the wide receiver position. If Tennessee is able to land another receiver later in the spring, do you think it's more likely it's an experienced receiver? They added Amari Jefferson, but he did not play this past fall. Do you think they're more likely to add somebody that has played a good amount, or what do you think there?
That would make the most sense to me, Josh. I mean, to add experience, because right now you have 7 receivers, 4 of which have never played a college down. 2 of the other 3 have played bare minimum, and then Chris Brazzell. And then, as for spring, they don't have Joakim Dodson. He's not going to be here. And Amari Jefferson is going to be limited, at least early on in spring practice after the hip deal. So you're looking at 5 scholarship receivers when they start spring ball. So I think it, and I know that this doesn't help you for spring, but I think even going into the fall, I think you would like to add experience if you're going to add something, and not a player who is yet to really do anything.
What do you think the ideal number in that receiver room is for this staff, maybe this year? Because just add them 1 during the spring, puts you at 8, and there's been other years where you've operated with more numbers in that position.
Yeah, you've operated with more numbers, but I mean, realistically, they don't ever rotate that much because of the tempo and that type of thing. And even when they did tempo this year, they still didn't rotate as much. So I don't think you have to have 10 or 11 receivers in there. You just got to have receivers that are going to be able to functionally help you in practice and in games. And I think the number minimum is 8. Like again, I think it would be not smart if you added nobody. So I think we'll kind of see where they are coming out of spring. But again, I think you're looking at least one, and preferably I think you want to have somebody that's kind of been there, done that a little bit.
And I asked that because in the past we've seen bigger receiver number rooms, and even though you didn't have those guys playing, those scholarship players could be impact players for you on special teams. So that way you were not playing as many walk-ons as Tennessee had to play the first couple of years. Now with Eckler, moving on and Heupel going into year 5, do you see a situation where Tennessee is playing less walk-ons on special teams? Maybe we see less fair catches on kickoff returns and possibly move to having Evan Berry type of mentality as far as kickoff returns and trying to go score.
I wish I knew the answer to that.
Okay.
I do think that there's more depth on the team, more quality talent on the team. And so you would think that there would be a spot. Now, is it receivers that are playing a bunch of that, or is it DBs that are playing a lot of kickoff return? I don't know. But I mean, I do think that sometimes the fair catch is the prudent play because, it just is. But then sometimes you need a spark on special teams. And so I think, there's probably a happy medium there to try to balance.